Strong Enough merch is now available. Go to strongenoughpod.com and see all the things that you can get to show your strong enough pride, as well as remind people and yourself that you are strong enough and you are worth it. Welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is a fan favorite back for her third appearance. We're going to talk about why sometimes you need to stop trying to fix things and instead move on to building something new. We're also going to talk about the importance of vulnerability in your healing. Please help me welcome Staci B. Staci, oh my God, I am so excited to have you here today.
I'm so happy to be here. We always have the best conversations.
We really do have the best conversations, and I feel badly for the people that don't get all of our conversation because we do cut, parts of it out for what we actually end up airing. And I think if people could have every little bit of it, well, they'd be jealous.
They would be, because they're missing all the F-bombs.
That's right.
Although I'm sure there will be a few, but there were several in the pre-interview moments.
Right, and the pre-interview moments didn't even last that long, but
No, they didn't.
That's just who we are. Well, Staci, I personally wanted to have you back, but the fans, the people who watch us and listen to us, they're really who's in charge, and they absolutely love you. Last week we aired a compilation episode where I just took bits and pieces from a lot of my favorite guests, and as soon as you popped on the screen, I'm not even kidding, people were commenting like, "Oh my God, it's Staci. She's my favorite. I love her." And so I knew that that was my cue to get you back on here.
Well, that's wonderful, because I like to talk.
Well, I like talking.
And I have things to say.
Yes, you do. So we're just going to jump right into those things. For the people who didn't see your first two episodes, first off, shame on them because they have missed gold. But for those people, will you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, it's if someone didn't see those first two episodes, in terms of who I am, you didn't miss anything because I called a friend the other day and she answered the phone and she's like, "Who dis?" And I said, "I have no idea."
I love it.
She's like, "What you doing?" I'm like, "Regulating my nervous system." This is what I'm doing.
Because I love it.
Hilarious, right? Yeah, I do lots of different things because I am a neurodivergent child of trauma who now realizes I probably have ADHD, along with God only knows what other neurodivergent aspects. And I'm done feeling bad about that. So, I don't really have a brand because my brand is I have no brand because you never know what you're going to find with me. And that's life. You wake up one morning and you're all excited about something and the day just tilts sideways and maybe for the good and maybe for the uncomfortable and maybe for the evolution and maybe for the joy, probably all of the above, you know? So I love to write. That's what I do predominantly. I have reactivated my writing career and in terms of essays and articles and things like that. But I also, psychology and trauma informed things are my hobby because that's what I've needed to do for me to understand who I am. But I do lots of things. I write a ton of haiku. I teach, I facilitate, I create curriculum, I act, storytelling, anything having to do with connection.
I love that. As someone who sometimes struggles with connection, or I guess I should say it's my defense mechanism. And when I'm feeling badly or, when mentally things just aren't good, I withdraw. and I refuse connection. What makes you able to, or what led you to be able to really just grasp that connection and strive for it? Because I think it's really important in our lives. And, I find when I do connect, it does make me feel better. So, how did you learn to do that? And what has it brought you in terms of peace and happiness?
Well, peace and happiness are ephemeral, right? I mean, everybody strives for that, and it's another lie we've been
Mm.
told. Because there is no such fucking thing as eternal bliss and peace and happiness. If you're a human being, that is not possible. You know, not everybody may be as mercurial as I am, but we all have, the ups and downs, and sometimes they're peaks and valleys, and sometimes they're more like sine waves, but we all have them, you know. I think the thing that drives me in connection is the fact that I experienced trauma, because the result of developmental trauma is a disconnection from who you really are. Because there's a wonderful Venn diagram. We might have talked about this the last time, where the overlap of who you really are and what you perceive you need to have your needs met creates that third Venn diagram of who you pretend to be and what you cut off in yourself in order to have those things: food, shelter, affection, validation, love, whatever. And so I think at the end of the day, that's what really drove me. And I don't think I've told you this story. I was living in Tampa. This is probably like 15 years ago. And I had gone to the YMCA for a yoga class and was distraught to find out that they had replaced it with silver sneakers because the yoga teacher was sick. So right? I can see your face. So, I'm like, silver sneakers. I'm like 42, you know? So I left because I was not in a very namaste kind of place. And I went home and I had the CD that came with Caroline Mace's book, St. Teresa of Avila. And I think it's called The Castle. It has Castle in the title. And Caroline Mace is an amazing spiritual teacher if you can handle the bitch slaps, because she does not wear a velvet glove and she is going to tell you what it is directly. There's no hand holding with her. So I put this CD on, and she's talking all about the value of knowing who you really are. And on my purple yoga mat in the middle of my dining room, I remember saying, I really want to know who I am. Man, that was a choice I did not understand the volume of, because I'm still dealing with it. But it's about that connection to knowing who you really are. I love how people talk about self care. Okay, how do you take care of a self you don't even know? How do you do that? I'll tell you how you do that. You get a massage and you take a bubble bath with a glass of wine. That's how you do that. you know? And not that there's anything wrong with those things. We all enjoy a good massage, hot tub, bubble bath, whatever. But it's so much deeper than that. And in order to really give yourself outstanding self-care, you have to know who you are. And you think you do. But I'm telling you, if you've not done the work, you don't know. You're still wearing a dozen masks that you don't even know are there.
Let's talk a little bit about that work, because I happen to know that you created something kind of to help with that. I actually have it upstairs. I have not started it, but you created a 10-minute self care journal so that people can figure out who they are and figure out what they need. How has that really impacted people? What have you seen from people who have really committed to doing that work with the journal?
What I've seen is, trying to think of the analogy. I've seen the weekend warrior itis. That's what I've seen. And what I keep telling people, first of all, It started because I was kvetching to my therapist actually about I'm so bored with journaling. I'm tired of my own shit. You know, I don't want to read about how unhappy I am or how this isn't going the way I wanted it to. Like I'm over it, you know? And she's like, "Well, why don't you just do a brief check-in with yourself?" I'm like, "Well, have we met? Because you're going to give me an idea and I'm going to put it on steroids and turn it into something," which is exactly what I did. So, because she said check in, but I'm like, that's too vague. You know, we all have a physical aspect, a mental aspect, an emotional and spiritual aspects. All of those need to come into the equation, you know? And so the thing when I do interviews and podcasts or whatever and talk to people, I'm like, please stop conflating constancy and consistency because you don't, when you weekend warrior it, I can't believe I just made that a verb. My mother is apoplectic right now as she's listening to this. But when you weekend warrior it, you burn out. So don't start out wanting to do it 7 days a week. If that ends up happening, awesome, bully for you. You get to take 10 more baby steps toward knowing who you really are. But if you're doing it twice a week, 3 times a week, I mean, that is something I am, and I am hyper focused on this. So let me just be clear that I am bringing my Louis Vuitton to this cruise. Okay. I am very focused on being slow and letting the turtle be my totem animal, that it doesn't have to be at a million miles an hour, which is kind of interesting considering I'm almost 60 now. And I'm finally getting to that where, like, the first 30, 40 years of my adulthood, I was like Kate Bush running up that hill, trying to get to wherever I thought I needed to go. So um, I think the biggest thing for anybody who's going to use it is the benefits are there. Don't conflate constancy and consistency. Because one of the gifts I've gotten from it is that I can evaluate myself in those 4 areas and be feeling really crappy physically with chronic pain and stuff like that, but I can still feel good emotionally because it separated it. Whereas before, without asking the question, it was all just getting clumped into one big how do I feel? And whichever was the loudest took over and didn't allow the voice of the other areas of my life, my mental state, my emotional state, my spiritual state, had no room to voice how they were feeling because the pain just took over. Or if I'm upset or grieving about something, the emotional took over and I wasn't able to acknowledge. And so being able to separate those things has been a huge gift for me. It's made me much more productive.
I really love that you pointed out, just being consistent with it, because I do feel like a lot of people, when they want to make a change or they want to start something new or they want to start a lot of some things new, that they feel like, oh, I have to go 400 miles an hour right out of the gate. I have to do everything. I have
Right.
to get up at 5 a.m. and start my meditation for an hour and then work out for 7 hours and then go to work at 8 o'clock and just everything. And they do that for a day and they're like, "Well, fuck this, like, I can't do all this, this is too
Call
much."
me in a month and
Right,
let me know what you're doing
right,
because it's unsustainable.
right,
Nobody
right,
can do that. We get fooled by magazine articles and TikTok videos and Instagram posts and everything else. It's all bullshit.
mhm.
I mean, I remember a few years ago, listening to like these coaches and stuff on social media, and I'm like, I want to see your tax return, bitch. I want to see the $1 million because
Mhm.
anybody can rent a fucking Maserati
Right.
and a house in Beverly Hills.
Mhm.
Okay, anybody. So show me the receipts. What's really happening? And I think that feeds into the I got to do it. I got to do it. I got to do it. That being on that hamster wheel,
Mhm.
you know, um, of our cultural conditioning. And then you add on, that's the macrocosm. And then you add on what we learned in our individual microcosms through family and teachers and other authority figures and stuff like that. And where there's overlap, that is hard work to change that. Because if you've got it in both the macrocosm and the microcosm, you better buckle up because it's going to take a minute for you to get straight to change that.
And people want that instant gratification. They want those instant results that I won't
Yep.
say never, but are very, very rarely going to happen in life.
They're lightning strikes. And my assertion is that 90% of the things that you see that you believe are lightning strikes are 20 years in the making.
Mhm.
Look at Viola Davis.
Love her.
Who just won the
Mhm.
Grammy and is now
Mhm.
an EGOT, which what they're a handful of people. I mean, there's more than that, but that is something to have all four of those honors. But she's almost 60. She's been at this since she was a teenager. This is nothing new for her, and I think it's really easy to lose sight of that in a world of clickbait and social media, and where it's so easy to fall down that rabbit hole of comparison.
Mhm.
How am I doing compared to how this person is doing? Instead of, your only comparison needs to be with, are you more of who you are today than you were yesterday? That's it. Because comparing yourself to other people, and I mean, this is nothing new. I'm not saying anything revolutionary, but it's a good reminder.
I agree. I agree. We get on that hamster wheel. Again,
Mhm.
there's a lot of hamster wheels going on,
And
that
we just jump from one to another without even realizing it.
right, or sometimes we end up being the hamster that gets going so fast that they fly out of the wheel
Mhm.
entirely,
Yep.
which is funny to watch, but
It is funny
not
to watch. But the interesting point in what you just said is that when you get kicked off the hamster wheel, you then have a choice. But most people don't take it as an opportunity to take a breath and make a choice. They just default to jumping right back on. And I don't know of the things that I mentioned, if this was what was on your heart, but I think it's valuable information, so I'm going to share it. Sonia Renee Taylor, who wrote The Body Is Not an Apology, did a webinar, whatever you want. I don't. She and this other woman are launching this radical honesty institute or something with Barrett Kohler Publishing, who's published her books. And Alok Menon was on, who, if you don't know who he is, everybody, you need to go follow him on Instagram. This guy is like Rumi level old soul. It's just amazing. So it was the three of them, and someone brought up the question of, if you know that your purpose is to do what you're doing, and spread the light, spread the connection, be a light worker, help to change the world that we live in. What do you do about the practicalities? Got to pay my rent. The cell phone bills due. How do I do that? And I'm paraphrasing, but Sonia said something that was really hit me between the eyes. And she said, as long as you're on that capitalist hamster wheel, asking that question of, how am I going to make money? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to have a 401k? You are never getting off that capitalist hamster wheel. You need to ask a different question when you choose to get off or you get kicked off. And the question is, what is it that you really want to do? And it inspired me to ask myself that question. And my question is, how do I spread more of, I love you, you're not alone? How do I do that? And the universe will take care of the rest of it. And I mean, it's taken me a year and a half to get to this place because the conditioning is that ingrained, especially the older you are. I mean, it just is. You've been on the planet longer. But it occurred to me, what am I going to trust more? A capitalist system which is oppressive and destroys people's souls, or what I believe is greater than I am? What am I going to believe in? And it's not easy because you look at the bank account and you look at the reality of things. And especially if you've had some type of developmental trauma, it can be 10 times harder because it reactivates your nervous system into feeling unsafe. And that can cause you to do lots of things that you wouldn't do if you weren't in that place. So it's it's an individual journey for everyone. Like I said, it's taken me a year and a half. It was a year and a half ago when I was like, you know what? The universe is going to take care of the money. And it has. But did I demonstrate I believe that? Not with the worrying and the anxiety and all the other crap that I've experienced in those 18 months. I feel I'm closer now to living that. I call it the brain to the belly drop because you can know it in your mind, but it's like a slinky. It's, it's got to work its way down into your belly so that it is in your being and in your knowingness, you know? And the deeper the cultural conditioning, the longer that drop takes, you know? But we don't have to be in a place where we're trying to fix systems that are so broken they cannot be repaired. And that's something else I got from the conversation they had. And she's actually come out publicly and said the ancestors told her late last year the body is not an apology is done as of the end of 2023. That's not where she's to put her time or energy. And she said something again that has really stuck with me, which is it is time to continue building the world I want to see and live in rather than spending that energy to try to fix a world that doesn't want to be fixed.
I love that. And that was one of the
Yep.
things that I picked up from your heart today that I was watching as you talked right before we got on here to chat. I looked at it though from less of a worldview and more of an individual view. What I mean by that is what you said was that we need to stop our effort to fix things and start building things. And I think about sometimes relationships or jobs or
Mhm.
situations that we're in that we continue to try to repair, but they're not worth repairing. Or we've grown past them, or maybe they have grown past us. And how important it is for us to see that that's okay. You
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about that from a personal standpoint. And when I say personal, not necessarily something that's happened in your life, but when we're looking at it from a more direct approach versus a worldview.
No, absolutely. And you can't, in my opinion, you can't affect change on a world level unless you've already done the work on yourself. It's just not possible. And, I've been at this, I mean, I got my copy of As a Man Thinketh by James Allen in 1988. So I've been on this road for a long time. And returning to where I grew up and becoming a caregiver for my mom, who, let's just be honest, your parents install your buttons if you're raised in a nuclear family. And so dealing with that, learning how to process it and not take it out on her changed me at a cellular level. So I feel like I am in a place where I want to continue building my world in a way that I want to live in and also taking it outside of that. But if you're new to the journey or if you've been doing this for a few years, or it's something that you're interested in, but you're not quite sure you want to put your foot on that path, um, first of all, what I would say to that is there are people out there who have been where you are. You will always have the support that you need because it's going to be a rocky road. I'm done with these people who are like, Klieg lights and the choirs of angels and the Greek chorus, telling you how fabulous everything is because there are times where you're sitting in the mud, drying in the crack of your ass, and you can't get out of the swamp, you know? But there are When you do this, you will have the people in your life that will be able to support you in that. So that wasn't an answer to your question, but I felt like it was important to say. But yes, what is it that you need to let go of? You know, I've been hearing a lot about how sometimes you have an aversion to leveling up because you know it's going to mean you're alone for a while in certain areas. And I had a really interesting insight into something I do. And that is like when I find a workshop or if I find a teacher or something that I'm just so excited about, I want to share it with everybody. And I always thought I was doing that out of a benevolence. But I see now there's a lot of please come along with me because I don't want to be alone in that. And once I realized I was doing that, I'm like, you're never alone, And if somebody's not interested, let them be not interested. That's perfectly fine, you know? But it can be hard in the moment to go, I'm just going to keep trying because this relationship means something to me. I've known them for that's another big lie. The longer you know somebody, the better the relationship. Fuck that. I had someone in my life once who always used to make me try to make me feel bad about myself that I didn't have friends, from high school or middle school. I'm like, and then I moved back here, and I'm like, they're all like MAGA Trump carrying. I'm like, this is what I'd have been had I said I'm not the fish in that pond at all, you know? So it's painful to realize you're in the wrong pond. It can be. It can be lonely. It can be uncomfortable. It can feel unsafe, even though it's really happening as you're not familiar, you know? But you've got a fabulous group of people who watch this podcast on a regular basis. There's community there, you know? You have to find a way to trust that you'll find that community and that it may mean you are alone for a little while. There may be a few months, a year, where you're not doing the things you used to do and you miss going to the movies with a friend or having coffee with this one or grabbing a bite to eat with that one. But you have to ask yourself what the cost is. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Because if you're getting two drops and you are squeezing that sucker for all it's worth for 2 hours at a clip, you just awareness to make the choice. No one's judging you for what you do except you. you know, no one's judging you. Do what you need to do, but you are worth having a level of awareness that enables you to ask that question. Because we're so worried about disappointing people and hurting people's feelings. And, that's
And
just how I feel about it at this point.
I think you just answered the question I was going to ask, which was, why do we continue to put ourselves on those relationship or work or situational hamster wheels and not get off and, move to a different space in the cage? And it sounds like the predominant reason is because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. We don't want to disappoint somebody. How do we get over that fear?
Well, by recognizing that you really don't have the power to make someone feel anything. And existentially, that sounds great. In practical life, it can be a little more difficult to grasp and implement. And I understand that because if you say something and somebody starts crying, your ego is going to automatically assume you're responsible. And it is not a license to be cruel. I want to be clear about that. It is not, it doesn't give you the space to be mean to someone. But when you are taking care of yourself, aligned with who you know yourself to be in that moment, and making a choice to move yourself into more of that place, and someone's feelings get hurt, that is not you. So there's a difference. If I say to somebody, you're as dumb as a box of rocks, I don't know how the hell you get out of bed in the morning, that's one thing. If you say to someone, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight because I really need to take some bubble time. That's what I call it. I need to take some bubble time for me. And the truth is, with a real friend, you don't even have to add that addendum. I can't make it tonight, you know? And if you feel like you want to share why, that's fine too. There are no rules about that. But if you are taking care of you and someone else gets their feelings hurt, that is not about you. If you're not being mean, if you're not being immature, nasty, trying to hijack someone's emotions or manipulate them, then their feelings are not your responsibility unless you're purposely trying to create them to get what you need.
I think that is such a huge meaningful lesson for so many people because we do take on that burden of somebody else's feelings and that we have caused this situation or
Yep.
this disappointment.
Well, and one of the things that I get on a soapbox about occasionally is people apologizing for crying. God, does that piss me, you know? And I actually had a medical appointment this week and I was talking about some emotional stuff and I felt myself tearing up and I went up and I stopped and I said, I am not going to apologize for that. And she said, good, I'm glad. Because we make ourselves feel bad about expressing our emotion through tears. And that is just patriarchal bullshit, you know? And it's a journey. You're not going to be able to stop doing it right away, but awareness will bring you to where you want to be eventually. You know, even I've been on this soapbox for a couple years now, started to say it. You know, the difference is I recognized it and I chose not to. And I think that's what we miss in terms of what really needs to be celebrated on our journeys. We celebrate getting to the destination, you know? We celebrate the milestones instead of going, that was a real win for me on Thursday. Huge win. Let's pop some confetti and have a celebration for that. And I did in my own way because that was an important step for me. I see so many people on social media. Well, they get great news about something or they're upset about something and they start to cry and they apologize. And every single time, do not apologize in the comments. And the responses I get are staggering. So many of us know that we don't need to be doing that it is a patriarchal compliance situation more than anything else, and yet we still do it. So it's about awareness. It's about, is it going to hurt me if I end this relationship? Am I going to be scared if I leave this job? Now, don't be a freaking idiot. Like I've been on multiple occasions where I'm like, I let it get, see, because that's the other part of that, right? If you've got a high tolerance for pain, you let that shit build and build and build and build and build. And then it's the camel and the straw. And boom, you're gone. And now you've got whatever you've got in savings and no job. So don't be stupid about it the way I have been, like I said, multiple times. Allow yourself to feel what it is that situation's making you feel instead of trying to whitewash it with toxic positivity. You know, emotional dissonance is possible. It exists. It's a skill. You can learn it. But resistance to that is what causes people to make dumbass decisions. And then you blame the decision and not your behavior that caused the decision. And then that gives your ego justification to feel superior that I tried it. I tried it and it didn't work. No, bitch. No, that is
You
not what
didn't
happened.
try.
You didn't try. You had a trauma response from taking the crap for so long. And that's why you made the choice that you made. It wasn't out of, I want to take care of myself and I want to do what I love. And yeah, bullshit. and I'm calling you on it. And I only know because I've done it.
I love it when you call people on their bullshit because you do it in such a fantastic way.
Thank you.
Like,
Well,
it's
it's not
amazing.
helpful to live in your own
Mm.
BS. It just keeps you because everything in this world, in my opinion, comes down to do you believe you're a victim or do you not believe you're a victim? It's one of those two things because that's not something you can ride the fence on.
Right.
Every moment of your day, you are either acting as a victim or acting as a beneficiary, as someone who believes they are worthy of receiving all of life. And all that happens when you ride that fence is you get a fence post in your crotch, and it doesn't feel very good.
What do we do with those people who I don't even wanna say can't see, I'm gonna say refuse to
Yeah,
see
it's a refusal, it's resistance.
that they are the victim in everything. They refuse to take responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. It's nothing that they did. I know a lot of us wanna help those people,
You can't.
but
You can't. You can try one or two times, and then you got to make a decision as to is because I hate to be so mercenary about it, but again, I'm going to be 60 in July. So the level of energy I have when I wake up in the morning is different from the level of energy you have when you wake up in the morning, which is different from the level of energy a 20-year-old has when they wake up in the morning. I see my energy as so precious, and I wish I'd have been able to do that when I was younger. But I see what I get every morning as so precious, and I only have so much to spend it on. It is mercenary. It is at this point. You know, do I want to listen to you whine and complain when you're not willing to take any step on your own to change where you're standing? And my answer is a hard pass. Now, you want to think I'm a bitch because of that? You want to think I'm selfish and I'm thoughtless? You can think whatever the hell I know who I am, So that's not, you can think whatever you want, but I'm unwilling at this point in my life to expend my energy on that. And, you've got to ask yourself the question, and I'll tell you, the resistance to that word is huge. And I'll tell you how I know that. Because after I broke up with someone for the third time, I'm driving across the causeway in Clearwater, Florida, going, fuck, what, what the hell, Staci? Why? After all the work that you've done and all the things that you know and all the wisdom you've absorbed, and how did this happen? And it was like there was a chorus in the back seat that said, because you believe you're a victim. Oh my God. It was like someone stabbed me in the belly. But I really started thinking about it. And I'm like, well, how does a victim act? How does someone who doesn't believe they're a victim act? And the next thing I knew, I had like 20 word pairs. I'm extra. So I made them into cards. I laminated them. I did focus groups because I'm like, this is something, but I don't know what it is. So I met with a bunch of people, and I had really, I don't use the word pray because that has so many energetic charges to it. But I had sat with myself and contemplated what is the opposite of a victim. And everything I read said, survivor, didn't like that. Thriver, that's just a survivor with a mask on. That's all
right.
that is. So I waited. To my credit, I waited. And it came to me that it was a beneficiary, probably from an etymology rabbit hole in the dictionary. And so I made the cards with victim beneficiary. Like I said, about 20 of them. Had like 5 different meetings with groups of people. Every single one of them said, I'm not a victim. Okay, George. All right, Betty Sue. That's not what I'm seeing, but you hold on to that. Okay. So I was crushed because I'm like, now what do I do? And it was my mom. I had come to Pittsburgh where I live now for an event she was doing for her 70th birthday, and I showed her the cards and I told her what had happened, and she goes, Staci, victim is really just ego. And that's how I did the Out Your Ego book and deck of cards, because it's ego, you know? And that's a more friendly term that people can take on and not feel as if they're bad or blaming themselves for being the victim. But we all do it all the time. Apologizing for crying is being a victim, for God's sake. Like, we don't think about all the ways it manifests. We think a victim is someone who's been robbed on the street, or God forbid, raped, or, sexually harassed or something. No, there are insidious threads through your life that scream to someone who's paying attention, I'm a victim. And that's the kind of shit that attracts narcissists to you, ladies and gentlemen. That's what that does. Because the more threads you have that you've not recognized and are dealing with, the more that is like the beacon in a lighthouse to a narcissist. You wonder why you keep getting narcissists in your life? Take a look in the mirror, because that is your always and forever only best friend. And that's what I have to say about that. I hope I answered your question.
Uh, I'm speechless because you throw out so much amazing stuff when you open your mouth, and I absolutely
My
love
mother
it.
might disagree with you.
Well, I'm in charge here, so I want to talk to you a little bit about vulnerability and its role
Interesting.
in um in healing ourselves and in moving forward. And what I mean by that is I was reflecting on our last conversation, and you kind of opened up about some personal things that you hadn't really talked about before. And you said, you know what, I'm just going to put this out there and I'm going to say what I need to say and tell my story like it is. And recently, last week actually, I was struggling with some things that had just happened in my life and were going on, and I was doing my usual recluse, let me just close everybody off and wallow in my sorrow. And I had a work meeting one day, and just something led me to tell this woman, like, you know what, I'm struggling right now. I'm having a tough time, and here's why. And I'm not saying that everything magically got better, as soon as I said that, but what happened was I found myself then able to tell somebody else, and to tell somebody else something that, was affecting me, and not about them, but like, hey, I was afraid to tell you this because whatever stupid reason I was making up, but now I want to share it. So I just want to hear how you feel about, the importance of being vulnerable and sharing how you're truly feeling. Does that play a role in how we can move forward and heal from different traumatic events or different circumstances or losses that we're suffering in our lives?
Absolutely. Because I realize it's interesting you bring this up, because I just had a realization in the last week or so that what people call courage is actually the willingness to be vulnerable. And courage is a positive attribute culturally, where vulnerability is not. I will return to said patriarchy uh, to explain that, because courage is what you do on the battlefield, right? You can't be vulnerable, but my God, you couldn't be more vulnerable. You know, it takes vulnerability to be courageous. They're forever inextricably linked, you know? And I think what most people who have not done what you did don't understand, that the willingness to be vulnerable, and let me just make a point for a second. Being vulnerable does not mean telling anyone and everyone what you're dealing with. Okay? That's a really important distinction, because I'm going to be vulnerable, so I'm going to tell the first Tom, Dick, or Harry who shows up why I'm bleeding inside. No. You need to make sure that you choose somebody who has already demonstrated to you their worthiness to be trusted, and that it's safe with them. That is critical. I'm going to say that again. They have demonstrated they are worthy of being trusted, and you feel safe with them. That's who you choose to be vulnerable with. Not the narcissist X who happens to text you when you're in the middle of a breakdown. Okay. That's choices. We all have choices. Um, but the willingness to be vulnerable is without a doubt the most empowering thing you can experience, because they say in the 12-step rooms, you're only as sick as your secrets. And although you might not have considered keeping it secret what you were dealing with, you were keeping it secret. You were harboring it and petting it and taking it out and looking at it and deciding if you wanted to hold it up to the light and going, yeah, it's better in the darkness. I'm just going to leave it in the darkness. And by opening up and being vulnerable to somebody, you brought it to the light. Where A, it's nowhere near as scary. B, you don't feel as alone. And the level of awareness and connection it creates. Because what I will say about the recluse thing is that I view everybody's behavior now through a fight, flight, freeze lens. Because I remember laughing. One of the therapists I follow on TikTok quoted a study that revealed that 12% of uh, humans have experienced early trauma. And I'm like, 12% my white ass.
Yeah.
Like, try 4 to 5 times that amount.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that to someone, they're like, "How do you know?" I'm like, "Observing behavior.
Just look around.
Look around." And when you and like I said, I've begun to look through the lens of fight, flight, or freeze. That's a freeze response. And when you find yourself in fight, flight, or freeze, it's because you don't feel safe. I have on my Google Calendar at 1:30 every day, it pops up with "How are you freezing?" Because that's my default. Not that I don't fight and not that I don't flee, but my default, everybody has a default, and mine is freeze. And that means sometimes physically not being able to move if I don't feel safe. It can look like scrolling through TikTok for an hour or binging on some show I have found that I like. Anything from the People's Court to something new, you know, um, because you migrate toward familiar things.
Mm-hmm.
Your pillow, your blanket, a TV show that you're used to that you've seen a million times, but it's a formula, so it feels safe, you know? And so the awareness of whether you, and I would really encourage people to look up the manifestations of fight, flight, or freeze. Because, like what we were talking about earlier with the victimhood, it is threaded through your life. Because you don't have to have experienced trauma as a kid to experience trauma as an adult and have some of these, what I used to think were quirks and eccentricities. I'm like, no, they're just trauma responses. That's nice. Here's my head exploding like a dolly painting. But okay. Um, but to look up what the manifestations can look like, because it's not just getting in a fist fight if you're in fight. It can, because my thing with when I'm in fight, I get contrary. I just choose the opposite side for the sake of choosing the opposite side, just because I can. And I'm smart enough to do it and debate either side of the argument, but I'm going to be contrary when I'm in fight. You know? So there are so many different ways this shows up. And I think if you can be, that's the first step. If you can begin to recognize that, then and talk about that with someone you trust, that's a great way to be vulnerable. And also move you toward who you really are and release the things that you don't want to be a part of your life anymore. Because everybody's like, oh, let it go, let it go. And I'm like, look, letting go is easy. It's letting it stay gone that's the problem. You know, anybody can let go, but how long are you going to let it stay gone? And by building community, like you started to do with this person in the work meeting, and whether or not it even ends up being her, you now have an experience of being vulnerable and safe simultaneously. And that needs to be built upon in order for your nervous system not to go completely out of whack the next time you have the thought of doing it.
I love it, and I love that you twice mentioned that vulnerability has to occur or should occur with somebody that you trust and somebody
Mhm.
that can handle that vulnerability and be respectful of it. And I think lucky for me, I did that and
Right.
the person that I told, she was like, I get it. I know exactly what you're going through. And, when we talked about it, but I think it could easily turn a different way because if you pick the wrong person and then you're not going to get the
Absolutely.
response that you want or that you expected, and then we're back to that person. Well, I tried to be
Right.
vulnerable, but it
Well,
didn't work.
you know what that's called? Self-sabotage.
Hmm.
That's what that's
Yes.
called. Because on some level, you chose somebody who wasn't safe because you didn't want to be vulnerable. And you are much better off going, I don't want to be vulnerable. I'm going to stay right here rather than choosing someone who is not going to be respectful. And I would even suggest going so far as to say, I really have something going on and I feel really vulnerable about discussing it. Are you in a place to hear that right now? I really just need someone to listen. I'm not looking for advice. There's a wonderful woman on TikTok, and she's not really making videos about this anymore, but she's a boundary coach. Her name is Cami Orange, and it's Kamiorange on TikTok. I think she's got an Instagram account too. But go back and look at some of her videos about making boundaries about that stuff, because I think so often, particularly if you come from developmental trauma, which means you probably grew up with no boundaries, you know, you don't even understand the word, much less what it means or how to implement them, you know? But saying that to someone, me saying, Claudia, I'm really struggling right now. And I really would love to share it with someone if you're up for that. I'm not really looking for advice. If you think you can just listen, I trust you. I would like to be able to do that. And if the person says no, well, get down on your knees and say, thank you, Jesus. Because now you didn't go and open yourself up and bleed all over the place, only to have someone say, oh, can we get a mop in here?
And walk
you know,
away.
right. Instead of, or walk away instead of just listening, you know? So I would really, for someone who's new at this, I would encourage that beginning caveat of asking the person if they're open to this so that you don't run that risk. Because it's pretty bad to be vulnerable with somebody and have them respond in a way that makes you feel less than for whatever reason.
You mentioned that it would be better to be in that space and say, I'm just going to sit in this space of not being vulnerable
Hmm.
than self sabotaging. Why do so many of us go right to self sabotage versus just being honest, not only with ourselves, but with everybody else and say, this is where I'm at. I know it might not be the best place, but it's where I'm at for now. I'm scared to move out of it. So I'm just going to be here for a minute instead of making excuses and doing all this stuff that ends up damaging
Well,
them.
none of it's conscious. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's why doing the work to know yourself is so important because you can't, and maybe they will 100 years from now, who the hell knows? But right now, you cannot control your subconscious. And I envision it like this big castle with a moat and a gargoyle at the gate. And it is not going to let out information unless it feels that I can handle it consciously. So I've had to make friends with the gargoyle, and visualize whatever works for you. That's what I see it as for me. That it's just this castle of turmoil and contained thoughts and beliefs and that I don't have access to, but that still drive my life, whether I like it or not. And so when you do any kind of work, whatever it is for you, if you're a Christian, go to the Bible, you know, just don't take it literally. That's my only caveat with that. I mean, stick with the New Testament. Stick with what Jesus is saying. There's a lot of literal wisdom in that thing. If you're interested in another tradition like Buddhism or Sufism or something else, then pick up a book. Get a book by Rumi, who was a Sufi. Um, Watch videos on YouTube. YouTube is like a digital Wikipedia for every issue anybody could ever have, from changing the washer on a faucet to dealing with your dysfunctional family system as a child. I mean, and everything in between. There's so many steps you can take. There are so many tools out there to support you on this journey. You know, if someone wants to connect with me on Instagram or whatever, and I have a trauma resources guide that has a lot of that kind of stuff for free. It's a PDF. Happy to email it to you or message it to you, whatever. But there's so many tools out there that can be used. And I think what keeps people stuck in that self sabotage loop is the fear that we were talking about before. The fear if you take a step forward, you're going to be alone. You're not going to know what to do. It's going to be like being dropped off on the first day of kindergarten without a snack, no lunchbox, no extra pair of underwear in case there's an accident. You know what I mean? And it's terrifying. And the self sabotage is familiar. People may think it's comfort, but it's not. It's just familiarity. And I think fear is the reason we self sabotage. So I think journaling is a great way to try to access some of that in yourself. What am I afraid of? Just write. No one needs to see it unless you choose to share something. But get to know that for yourself. What is it that terrifies you? That people are going to make fun of you, they're going to reject you, they're going to think you're less than, they're never going to call you again, you're never going to see them for the rest of your life. What is it that terrifies you? Because that is an open door for self sabotage.
I think that's a good place to wrap up this portion. We, of course, are going to chat a little bit more before I let you go, but we're going to change directions here and we're going to talk about tattoos.
Okay,
We have had some good tattoo
we
conversations.
have, we have.
So, first off, I would love a tattoo haiku at some point. I don't know if you do those on the fly.
I don't, but there's a beautiful one that I'll share with
Mm,
you that actually, now that we're talking about it, maybe I'll get it tattooed. And it goes, exhale the remnants of wounds that steal your freedom. No more prisons, breathe.
I love that.
Yeah,
That's
'cause I've been wanting to get another one. I really have. But I'm balanced right now. And so I'm like, where do I put it? So I'm not sure what that's going to look like.
so let's see what is a fun tattoo topic we can have then. What is a tattoo that you have seen on somebody else and you're like, "That's super cool, but I would never put it on me." So for me, it's skulls. Um,
Okay.
Skulls are cool on other people, but I don't wanna put one on me. So is there something that you have that's similar?
Yeah, I would never put anything on my face.
Hmm. Agree.
I don't want it in the middle of my back of my neck
Okay.
for me.
Mm,
And I also, and I'm not going to say never, but I have an aversion to color.
interesting.
I like the black. It feels more tribal to me,
Mhm.
whereas color feels more artistic. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know people who have magnificent tattoos that take up their whole chest and their belly and their backs and whatever. And that's awesome. But first of all, I'm not into that level of physical pain. Cause that you can
Mhm.
tell me whatever you want to tell me, but I know better.
It
That does
hurts.
not feel good,
Mm.
you know? And the worst part of it is as it heals with the itching,
Mhm.
and you can't scratch it, you know? So I do have a friend who just got his first tattoo though, and he has just a sprig of blue in it, like a teal like blue.
Mhm.
And I like that. I like that. But again, for me, there's something so primal about tattoos. It's more of a tribal, aboriginal kind of thing for me, and that doesn't include color.
I think that's interesting that you say that because I feel similarly about my arms.
Okay.
So my whole arm is black and gray. There are tiny flecks of color. I have like a representation of kintsugi on one of
Okay.
them, so there's some gold. And then I just actually got a cover up, and he put some teal around it,
I saw that on
which
Instagram.
yeah,
It's
which I was
gorgeous.
okay with, thank you. Russell Liu, Revolt Tattoos, Meadows Mall, Las Vegas. And I like what he did with the color, but I'm the same way when it comes to my arms. I don't know. I just feel like black and gray is better. I don't know.
And I've seen so many people with
Mhm.
magnificent artwork
Yes.
tattooed on them. It's it's not a judgment, it's just not for me.
I
I like them small,
right.
you know? Yeah, I do. I prefer them small. And actually, one, two, yeah, I have two on each side right now. So the fifth one, but I'm like, there's no place in the middle of my body I want to put it.
Right.
I'm not going to get it at my lower back at this stage of my life. You know what I mean? I don't want it on my throat.
Thank goodness.
I mean, because I love Teddy Swims. Do you listen to his music?
No.
Oh, girl, you need to go check his ass out.
Okay. Okay.
Trust me. But he is tatted from head to toe, including his eyelids.
Mm.
And I'm like, dude, that's a choice.
It's a very
Right.
specific
Right.
choice.
Like that's someone like driving down the road in a neon green fit. Okay, that's a choice. you know, not one I would make, but go on with your bad self, you know? Um, so I don't know. I don't know. Because the one that hurt the most was the wrist. I don't know if
Oh,
you found that sweet mother of God.
there were a
Like if
couple
I ever
points.
decided
Yeah.
to make that choice,
Mhm.
that would not be the method.
Yeah,
That's
it
all I know
was
after having the inside of my wrist tattooed.
yeah, when it was on the wrist bones, I felt like he was drilling into my soul. I mean,
Yeah, it's painful.
it was bad. I do wanna give a hopefully helpful tip to you and others for the itching. So I
Okay.
call it the weave pat. So for those of you that have ever had extensions, AKA a weave, you can't scratch it.
Yeah.
So you gotta pat it. You pat that
Right.
weave so you can
Right.
pat the tattoo, and that helps without, injuring it.
Can I
So
tell a funny weave story quickly?
I think you have to.
So this is so politically incorrect now, but this is like 1996 or 97 in Manhattan. And a friend of mine had moved in with me who's black, and she would go to this guy named Al on the fifth floor of some building down near the South Street Seaport, right?
Sounds totally safe and legit.
Totally legit. And so I was like, I want to get a weave. And she's like, well, that sounds like fun. So she went with me. We bought hair, which was a little bit more auburn and brighter than what I have right now, and real tight kinks. So in I go with my bag of hair with her to see Al. I'm the only white girl in the whole place, of course,
Mhm.
which doesn't bother me. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. But I don't know that they were all comfortable with that, you know? So he starts in whatever. Well, I will have to find the picture and take a picture of it and post on Instagram for you to see because it looked awesome and yet it's
Mm.
hilarious. So it was a little bit shorter than what I have now, and like this wide.
Oh my gosh.
I looked like Little Orphan Annie with this redhead weave because my hair is thick and kinky enough that they were able to do the
Mm.
cornrows to sew it in.
Right.
So I'm like 2 days into it, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this itches really bad. So, and he had told me when you get a shower, you can't get it wet. Now, I think there are some ways you can do that now, but again, we're going back almost 30 years ago.
Right.
So, I will never forget standing in front of the bathroom mirror trying to put the shower cap on. It looked like I was trying to put a condom on my head. Because, like, this much was the shower cap. And I will have to find that picture
Yes.
and post it for you.
How long did your weave last? How long were you
Not
able to
long.
keep it going.
I kept it long enough to go and fuck with my brother's mother-in-law
Oh, nice.
because I can be like that. Someone who tells me, treats me, and gives me the energy that they think I'm out there and weird, I'm gonna just prove you right. That's what I'm gonna do. So, yeah, very conservative, northeastern Pennsylvania type people. And I didn't know his girlfriend, who's now his wife, that well either. And I'm like, I'm going to Thanksgiving dinner with my little orphan Annie Weave and her brother, who is even like all of them on acid in terms of conservative stuff. And that's how I showed up.
I love it.
Mhm.
I love it.
So could have been a trauma response, or maybe I was just having fun. We'll never know.
Right. Either way, it gave us a good story, and I cannot wait
Exactly.
to see
Makes a
this
good
photo.
story.
Yes.
Yep.
Staci, where can people find you? So if they want to pick up your 10-minute journal, if they want to learn about their ego, if they want to find out where they can locate Al to get their weave, where can they find you?
Yeah, I don't even know if Al's still there anymore. The easiest thing is my website, which is stacib.com. Because quick thing about that, my birth certificate's EY. But when I was 13, I didn't like how I made my Y's. So I changed it. Plus, it was the 70s and I got to put a heart on top of the I instead of a dot. So everybody won. But it's stacib.com, or hey, it's me, Staci B on Instagram. And you've tagged me in enough posts, they don't even have to look it up. They can just go to one of your posts or the Strong Enough podcast posts and
Track you
check
down.
it out through there.
Awesome. Staci, once again, you have been absolutely amazing. I can already say that we're going to have you back again because you give us so much amazing insight and information when you're here. So thank you.
Hard-won wisdom, you are not alone.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media so you'll never miss what's going on. Remember, until next week, you are strong enough, you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.